Okay, welcome to the next episode. So we're going to go ahead and talk about tables this time. So the table tool has evolved a tiny bit, so you might have some subtle differences in this one, depending on if you have an older version or possibly a newer version than I do at the time you're watching this. But they have a table tool inside TactileView. So again, we're looking at that toolbar going all the way down to near the bottom, and there's something that looks kind of like a grid, basically, right below that draw dot tool and right above the graphing tool, which we're going to go into in the next episode. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and click on that table tool. And then by default, what you do is you just click and drag out a table. And now this is part of the evolution here, is that you will notice kind of on the sides or corners, if you will, of the right-hand side of your table, there's a little plus button. So you can either add columns or add rows right there. So if I click on Insert Row or click on Insert Column, it will insert that row or insert that column for me, just like so. And now, again, when you first draw it out, it's just going to be a basically 3x3. That's how they kind of always start out. That's your default. You can go click on these buttons to insert individual columns or rows until you have as many as you want. Or you can go over here to kind of your sub menu or toolbar. You can go to size and position if you want to, be very exact about your measurements or your, size of your table, kind of like you can do with all the other objects. But there's also an option for a little table of contents. So if you want to create a table of contents, you come in here and you can add stuff in there. But then below that, there is insert or delete columns and rows. And so this brings up just an option to insert columns and rows, but it lets you do kind of bulk actions, if you will. So we can insert rows, we can insert columns, we can delete rows, we can delete columns, and we can say, especially if we're deleting or inserting and we already have some stuff in the table, we might want to be inserting rows or columns kind of in between certain stuff. So it has an option to start that insert or that deletion from a certain row. And the same thing with how many rows you want to insert or you want to delete. You can choose the number. And then finally, you can also choose to keep the table dimensions or the cell dimensions. So, if maybe your table is as wide as it's going to get, and if it gets any wider, it's going to go over the edge of your paper, then obviously you wouldn't want your table to get any bigger, but you still might have to add a cell. So you could say keep your table dimensions the same, and then it would add a cell, whether that be your rows or your columns. It would add that without making the table any larger. On the other side of that, if you need to keep your cells all the same size, but you have some more paper space, you could choose to keep cell dimensions, and then you'll see that your table will get larger when you add an extra cell, and whether that again be a column or a row. So pretty simple little tool, really. You just kind of create a table. This is a great way to kind of create any sort of table, really, but it's very simple. It's very easy to use. It does operate or kind of act like the rest of the objects inside TactileView, which we covered in the last couple episodes. So, for example, you can add aliases, you can center, you can restrict your movement to just horizontal or vertical. You can change the line style, so if you want it to be dot, dashed, or what have you. You can even add fills or color fills. You can make it transparent or not if you want to be able to see things, through it or underneath it. You can add those audio labels, move it up or down in your layering system, and even fuse it with a bitmap image. Again, kind of basically turn it into part of a picture so that you could be able to erase part of it or even add to it with a pencil. And you can also just copy and delete that. So again, basically the same options as the rest of the objects, but I technically this is an object, but I kind of consider it its own thing. That's why we're giving it its own episode. Now, a couple more things to point out before we call it good on this one is once you've drawn out your table, of course, you're going to put things in your table. And so I'll just add a couple things in mind. So first I'm going to add a little label, and I'm just writing the word hello inside of my very top left cell. And then I'm going to just for fun, we'll mix it up. I'm going to add a little circle inside, same row, a few columns over, and I'm going to kind of shift this one, the little circle I drew, to the bottom left-hand corner of that cell. So now why did I just do this? So what you might happen is you're creating your table and you're working, and you might have to say shift your entire table, and you're like, oh man, I just put all my labels and everything in the right spot, and I'm going to have to rearrange it. Nope, thankfully you don't. If you grab your table and you move it, you will see that my text, including my objects or drawing elements I've put inside my table, as I am picking my table up and moving it around, I'm just clicking and dragging with my mouse, that stuff is following. So thankfully you don't have to worry about losing your spot, your position, if you need to shift your table over or something like that. Additionally, you might have to scale your table. Maybe you're adding rows, maybe you're adding columns, maybe you're adding cells, and you're like, oh gosh, my stuff's all full of it, and it's going to be out of place when I shift it. Again, nope, thankfully, you can grab one of the corners or the sides and scale it, and it's actually your text labels as well as any sort of, again, drawing elements like objects you've put in there will actually try to maintain their approximate position. So like my little circle again was in the bottom left hand corner of a cell, it's trying to stay in the bottom left hand corner of my cell. My word hello is centered, it's trying to stay centered. It doesn't always work flawlessly, but for the kind of, usually it's just a small amount of manipulation you do, again, scaling it just a little bit or something like that, it does a nice job for that. And so that's how you can add your text in, your drawing elements into your table, and thank goodness, as you move or manipulate, add rows, add columns, add cells, stretch it, whatever you have to do to your table, thankfully all of your stuff is going to stay in the table and even try to keep its approximate positioning, say again centered, or in my case centered for the text and bottom left hand corner for my drawing element. So I think that's super cool and super helpful, because the first thing that came to my mind is I filled a table full of stuff, and I was like, oh, what if I need an extra column? Is it going to just wreck all my alignment? Am I going to have to go back and shift all my labels? No, thankfully they've got ahead of all that for us. So that's your table tool. Pretty simple. Kind of come in, add your rows, add your columns, create any sort of table you want. Create a calendar or something like that. I also think this is worthwhile pointing out. I think the table tool would be a really good option for creating bar graphs as well. If you're just trying to do a simple bar graph, you could use this as a starting place and kind of fill some of your columns, like partially or part way. Like we could grab that, grab that detect shape tool and kind of detect the shape of some certain areas here. And I could drag this out like so, and then I could say go add a pattern fill to that just for fun. I like those mirrored half circles. Those are always my favorite. There we go. And now I did a bar chart I didn't complete my bar chart, but you get the idea. I'm just showing you this could be an easy way to create a bar chart from here. Of course, you'd have to add some labels and some more bars to your bar chart, but easy starting place for a bar chart. So tables can be cool for a whole bunch of different reasons, including that. So that wraps it up for tables. Pretty simple, pretty easy, and we'll see you in the next one.